Welcome back to All Over the Place, the official podcast of Media Pub Live. I'm your host, Eric Pervoznik, and welcome back as well, Jim. Jim Culver, how are you?
I'm excellent, sir. How about yourself?
Awesome. Life is good. Even though I had it's the melancholy things. I had to run an assistant coach tonight, which took time away from the kids playing baseball. But got to do what you got to do. So yeah. And also, Christine Leninger. Hello. And tonight, Marty not joining us this evening. He's still coming down, as we discussed on the last show. I think it was brought up. He and his lovely wife Nicole are on an Alaskan cruise, and they're still getting their regular land legs back. So Marty should be back with us next week. And with us tonight, we've got with us an author, a columnist, a guy with numerous publications and think tanks to his credit. And he's also an accidental college graduate. Please welcome to the show, Jeremy Lott. Jeremy, thanks for joining us here on AOTP.
So happy to be here.
Very cool. Is that a Hawaiian lei we've got sporting there?
Yeah, it's a lei.
It's party time. Here on All Over the Place, folks. And you can only see if you're watching us on YouTube, you'll understand that reference. But just play along with us on all the audio platforms. So Jeremy is with us. We're going to be talking about new book, actually a pair of books he's got out. First one is, or the most recent one is Growly Locks and the Three Humans, a bit of a play on Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Jeremy, tell us how this book came about. What's the story?
Yeah, so I've always had, I think probably George W. Bush inspired this book accidentally, where I've always hated golden mean arguments, but the thing that finally crystallized it was when he was talking about his tax cut package, and he said, some people say my tax cut package is too big, some people say that it's too small, but I say it's just right. And I threw something when I heard that. And no, like that's not how arguments work. Stop. And so I've always hated golden mean arguments. And you know, the thing that gives us the frame for a golden mean argument, at least the most popular one, is Goldilocks, right? And I thought, well, what if it was the other way around? And you know, you had a talking bear walking into a human house, and they were all saying, well, you know, trying to sell the bear on just right, and how would that go? Not very well. And so that was the impetus for.
Well, what did a golden mean ever do to you?
You know, it's weird because it would seem plausible because a lot of things you do seek a happy medium. Like this morning when I was taking a shower, it was too cold and then it was too hot. Then I get it just right. You know, that there are certain things that is true for, but often when it is not universally true. And so when you, often you want to pick A or B. You don't want to pick the thing in the middle because that ends up getting you nowhere. And so I wanted, you know, to just ridicule this idea and tell a fun kid story while I was at it. So that's what I did.
It sounds like it's, in addition to being kind of an entertaining read, it's designed to kind of help kids think critically a little bit about these things.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a moralistic writer, but I do. One of the themes that will come through over and over again is I'm encouraging kids to think, because I think that is just terribly important.
And some we could use more of these days.
Mm.
And the other book is, I love the little twisting on all the fables through the years, and it's called The Three Feral Pigs and the Vegan Wolf.
Yeah.
And the wolf's got an upset stomach in the book, and then the three pigs are, you know, just, well, tell us about this one and the story behind the story.
Yeah.
Of the three feral pigs.
So the agitation behind this book was not from me. I have a father-in-law named Len, and he grew up on a farm, and among other things, they raise pigs. And one day he was talking to me about this, and he just got off on this rant about how awful pigs are, and how, you know, if you ever get like knocked down in a pig pen, you know, like you were in trouble. It's bad because they will just start biting you and won't stop. And they're just vicious little things. And these are the cute ones in farms. You know, these aren't even like the javelinas or whatever they're called. You know, like the big tusks that will gore people. So pigs, but even farm pigs, but I mean, pigs in nature are often vicious creatures. And so I thought, well, wouldn't it be funny if you flipped the three little pigs and the big bad wolf, and had the wolf as the one that was afraid, and so the story is that you have a wolf named Kevin who's just a really lousy hunter, and he ends up because wolves, what they'll do is they'll bring down animals together, and then the pack will share in it, and it's not just the few that hunted, it's they bring it back, because there aren't that many that go out and hunt, right? And so he feels guilty that he can't ever make the kill, and so as part of that, he just decides, well, I can't eat this, and so he invents his own diet and accidentally ends up becoming a vegan. And the other wolves find out about this, and they're like, "That's no, get out of our pack." So he has to go out and make his way in the world, and these three wild pigs start hunting him, and so it's a story about how he manages to overcome the feral pig threat.
And that kind of reminds me of the dog Che on the unfortunately short-lived Good Family show. The offshoot from the world of Mike Judge with John Altshore and Dave Krinsky showing. Che wasn't allowed. His owners were just very chill people, and they wanted him to eat nothing but vegan food.
Yeah.
But he shunned them, and he went out and tried and chased down all the squirrels in the neighborhood.
Yes. No, I mean, the animals need to eat meat, or at least a lot of them do, so he very much pays a price for his veganism.
Well, what's the reaction been from vegans to this?
They've been fortunately chill. I think one of the things that helped is that just as I published this book, Amazon did this addition, like a restriction, so that in order to leave a review, you can't just do drive-by reviews anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You don't necessarily have to buy the book, but it helps. But you have to have bought X number, like a bunch of books, I don't know what the number is, but let's say it's 20 or something on Amazon. And so I've avoided the drive-by, veganing as a result of that. But the few vegans that I know that have read it have realized that it's I'm not being vicious toward them. He comes by his veganism honestly, and it's not necessarily ridiculing them. It's just what would happen if a wolf decided that he couldn't eat meat.
If we can't laugh at ourselves, who can we laugh at?
I know.
So thus far, no one has called the vegan police from Scott Pilgrim on you yet?
Yeah, not just yet, but we'll see. I'm ready for it. Bring it on, vegans.
That's one of my favorite movie scenes, by the way. I don't even like the movie, but I think that scene is hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, Scott Pilgrim is one of these things that the whole of it is not great, but some of the parts are pretty good.
Yeah, agreed.
And as I mentioned at the start of the show, you've worked with a lot of different publications and think tanks. Why the pretty much 180 going the kids book route?
Well, so I let's see, 2002, 2003, something like that. I moved out to DC, and I spent 7 years here. I'm here right now, actually, on a visit. And I tried, I wanted to put away childish things. I stopped with my comic books and all that other stuff, and tried to be a very serious person in our nation's capital. And I about halfway, I don't even think it was halfway through, a quarter of the way through, I just said, this sucks. And I decided that, a lot of people in DC are full of garbage. Obviously, that's a given. But, in addition to that, I realized that I had taken an important part of myself and tossed it for no reason. And so I picked it back up, and I moved back to Washington State, and I've been pretty happy. And, so as I started reading a lot more comics and had a couple kids and was reading them kids books, I said, I can do this. So, there you go.
And
What
I got to
did you
get
self-publish then, Jeremy, or like how'd you get it done? Where'd you? I mean, all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're like, I'm gonna write a children's book.
Yeah, well, I wrote. I've had a lot of experience with comic people. I have a publisher that we brought out an issue of a comic book called Movie Men, and I'm not joking, 7 other comic books that are all the artists done on, and someday I will release them. These are not other issues of Movie Man, though I do have another issue of that ready to go, basically. So I was in that space, and the comic book market is not great right now, and it's also not well developed through Amazon. I've seen what Amazon print on demand for comic books looks like. It's not very good. I've ordered them; they often come in really lousy shape. But Amazon has figured out more or less how to do the print on demand thing for children's books. So I said, well, there's a market for it, like a significant market. And so I said, well, why don't I just shift over there? I've got people who are really good at art, and it's children's books in some ways are easier because if you look at the number of panels for a comic book versus a kid's book, it's far fewer panels in the kids' books, right? So, it's probably the equivalent of, I don't know, let's say 5 comic book pages worth of panels in one children's book. And so I was able to go to several of them and say, how about it? And, they know me, they know that I don't pay great, but I pay on time and respect their art and am generally an easygoing person to work with. And so I was able to get Paula Ritchie is the artist of the first 2 books, and they're Doug Curtis, who been with me, is going to be doing other ones, and there are some other artists that I'm getting into the game with the kids book game with me as well.
Oh, so you're going to be switching up the artists, huh?
Well, yeah. Well, I'm going to. So these are part of a series called Fantastic Fables, and at least for the foreseeable, Paula, who's a dream to work with, I will keep working with her on those books. But I've written other children's books that are in slightly different, vein, and I'll work with other artists on those books. So yeah, I mean, Paul is the artist on this series, but there will be other one-offs in other series.
Got it. Okay.
And how did you come to work with Paula?
So I, knew her through the comic book world, and she has done. She wrote a novel as well, and she's very versatile. And what I didn't realize when I signed her up to do this is that she hadn't done the solo art on any one book before, and so it was a real learning experience for her to go through Growly Locks, and she's learned a lot and she's gotten a whole lot better. And I really love when you can see real improvement from one book to the next, and you always can with Paula. And so that's wonderful. She also, in order to keep it interesting, she creates all these like weird and interesting backstories for the characters. And I only very occasionally have to step in and say no. Yeah, I mean, she's, like any they're in the first in Growly Locks, right? I said that they need to be in the middle of a small town, and she decided that town needed a comic shop that was Lott's Comics, and so she just included that in there, and I loved that, And sorry, go ahead.
I always wonder about that when I read something like a comic book or a children's book that's very visually heavy. Like, how much is the balance in terms of creativity between the writer and the artist? Like, how much liberties can an artist take with a story in that kind of
I mean,
story?
It depends on how adventurous both the writer and editor are, and how much of a tyrant the editor is. I'm not much of a tyrant. There is a comic book that it's done, but again, it'll be a little while in the offing. Called Mega Humans Go to War, that I wrote, and Sean Langley is the artist on that. and there was one page where this guy named Captain Chicken Legs he kicks down a door, and he sent me the early art on it, and I said, well, this is good, but there's supposed to be 2 guys on the other side of that door, and there's 3, and that kind of matters because how he interacts with them in the next couple pages. And he looks back at the script and he goes, "Oh shoot, you're right." He goes, "Well, what if the door just kills one of them?"
How hard did he kick it? Holy cow!
I mean, yeah. And I said, "Okay." And so he Wicked Witches of the East or West. I can't remember which one had a house dropped on her, but he did that to this character. So. Yeah, I mean, it's
pretty funny.
There's a lot of interplay, and you can. I'm very much of the opinion that as long as it's serving the story, I'll give the artist as much leeway as I can. As long as it's making it better, as long as it's adding, as long as it's making it more entertaining and interesting. Fly away. I don't care.
So your kids, it seemed like were the first inspiration for things. And how much input did they give you in moving the stories along?
So it's varied, but I will read the stories to them usually before I have them illustrated, and I'll get some feedback. And so I have 2 children. My daughter Sparrow is 4, and my son Augustine is 2. And Sparrow's a little more into it, but Augie will sit through it to an extent. He likes it. He likes the finished product a little better, so because they can show him the pictures. And Sparrow is a very honest critic. If there's things that she doesn't understand or she doesn't like, she'll tell me. But it's usually been a positive experience with she usually likes the stories that I have to tell.
And test audiences, have you taken them to Sparrow's preschool or things like that for story time? And
these have been read at preschools and that sort of thing. I haven't done that. There's a longer like a chapter book that I wrote that I tried out on a class full of 4th graders over 2 different afternoons after lunch, which is an interesting time of the day. They were with me the whole time, and so that's a book called Princess Sparrow and the 3 Gifts that I'll publish at some point here. So I'm actually writing the one of the 2 sequels to that right now.
Princess Sparrow, know your test audience.
That's right. I actually started writing it before she was born because I had been working on all these comics, and my wife said, hey, so it's a girl, because I was away at a conference. And what do we name her? And I said, well, you've already named her, because you know how women a lot of times they'll come up with like a generic name, like for the baby, like my little bean or whatever. She called it my little sparrow, and I said, you already named her Sparrow. It's a girl. It fits. Let's go with that. Done. And so she said, okay. And so I was talking to some colleagues, and they said, okay, so you're writing a lot of comic books, but do you have any like kids books that a little girl might like? And I said, no, I don't. And I got to go fix that. And so then I went and started writing Princess Sparrow and the 3 Gifts and had it done before she was born.
Well, I hope there's a Prince Augustine book coming, so there's no unfair competition in the family.
I'll see what I can do. I have a niece and a nephew named Ollie and Lainey, and I introduced 2 characters named that in the series as well.
Keeping it in the family. I like it.
Yeah. So, I don't know. There's a lot of, I like telling these stories, and I like what I'm learning when I'm telling these stories. And it wasn't until I was close to 40 that I could even do dialogue. There was just something that didn't click in my brain. I'm sure you've all had that where you're just blocked on something and you're beating your head against the wall and the wall is winning, right? And finally there was a comic book I was trying to write, and one of the characters swore, and he swore in a way that I don't swear. And I went to change it, and I said, wait. No, that's not a good idea, because he is speaking in a way that you view as distinct from yourself. And that means you're making progress. You leave that in. So that wasn't a kid's book, by the way. But yeah, no, it was that they finally, let me realize that I can disattach myself from the characters enough to let them have their own voices.
Yeah, one of a long list of criticisms I would make to modern comics is that quite often every character in the book has the same voice, and it really reveals a lack of imagination on the writer's part when that happens.
Oh yeah, it's awful. I mean,
yeah.
and the other thing is that when you have these like legacy characters that historically spoke in a certain way, and then all of a sudden they just speak like the millennial writer or I don't know, something like that, who's writing them instead. It doesn't work for me.
Right. And I'm seeing a lot of that in Hollywood screenwriting as well. You basically will see, you can see a movie with a variety of characters, and they're different ages, but they all sound like a Hollywood screenwriter, of a certain age. And it's just you wonder what the quality control level is when that they can get away with something like that. And it's I feel like it's very condescending toward your audience to write characters that way.
Yeah, no, you gotta. I don't know. I don't know what the solution is. I think that the part of it is that Hollywood's just going to have to wither, and we're going to have to see other things that bubble up over time. I was talking there are other countries that have their own film industry. Like France has a fairly advanced film industry, but they speak in French, right? And Britain, it has a film industry, but they gear most of their stuff towards television, really. But if you get a country with a that is like an English language country that has its own film industry and that does it well, at some point they're just going to eat Hollywood's lunch. Like I don't see any way around that unless Hollywood decides to do better. But that I'm not seeing a lot of that for that. So I hope for it, but there's one book I wrote just because there's one of my favorite directors is Wes Anderson, right? And he does not, he writes his own very distinct thing, and I like what he does. And I actually wrote a book, and I was probably turned it into several books that I just want to send to Wes Anderson and say, can you adapt this, please? Because I think he'd do a great job with it.
Well, I noticed that new one he's got on Netflix now. What is that, Christine? We said it was maybe 40 minutes long?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep, 39 minutes. Yep.
Wes working quickly, especially after, it's such a storied career. And definitely get him in the mail to him. See what he is.
So, but yeah, so that's my adventures in children's books so far.
And one of the other books that I saw that you had is about the vice presidents.
Yes.
And the history of vice presidency. And it looks like a very funny book. And I got to add to the stack of books I've got on my list right now. But what inspires you to, with vice presidents? Yeah. They get short shrift. And so, what inspired you on that one?
Yeah, I often joke I'm the most living expert on the vice presidents. Initially, I was working with a publisher. They came to me and they said, could you write a book on the vice presidents? And I said, no. And they said, well, could you think about it? And I said, yeah, I'll think about it. And I, just gave it due diligence. And I realized that actually there's a crazy lot of American history that's tied to the vice presidency. And, 1 in 3 of our presidents were at one point vice president.
Mm-hmm.
If it gives you a 1 in 3 shot at the presidency, it cannot just be a joke or the butt of jokes. This is really and it's actually that understates its importance, because a lot of times when even if they weren't the nominee weren't the president, they were the nominee of a party, and that matters. Or Richard Nixon was on the ballot in 19 1952 to 1972, I think there was only one presidential ticket that he was not on. Like, that's
Really?
crazy. Yeah.
Huh.
Like that's a lot of elections where, he's a factor, right?
He was the Susan Lucci of politics.
Yeah, pretty much. So it's really, really, really important office. It's underrated, and it's it's made a huge difference in American history, and a lot of them just kind of sleepwalk their way right into the presidency.
But enough about Gerald Ford.
No, I recently was there was a inside sources. They like to do these point counterpoint debate things, right? And they got a hold of me and said, "Could you do a piece for us on the greatness of Gerald Ford?" Right? And I said, "Okay, sure, why not?" And I said that if, to the extent that there is any greatness in Ford, it was that he pardoned Nixon, which he has a pretty good argument that in order to accept a pardon, you have to admit guilt. So at least he got Nixon to stop lying about his role in this, right?
True.
And two, he vetoed a ton of bills and he had a nothing majority. There were super majorities of the other party in Congress, and he managed to get all the people of his own party and just enough of people of the other party that would hold together to sustain most of his vetoes. And so he was able to put the brakes on just a ton of legislation. And so, of course, the title I gave it when I republished it was All the President's Vetoes.
Nice.
Well, over my left shoulder here, we've got a book by Andy Vidopia, which also is a Penn State book, but there's also Michigan books. Twice in 1 year, I will say something nice about a University of Michigan grad, which Gerald Ford was.
There you go.
Speaking of Nixon, by the way, I don't know if you know this, Richard Nixon's brother is lives up here in Seattle. He's a college professor at University of Washington.
I did not know that.
He still teaches science professor. I've met him. He looks very much like his brother. Huh. So when I met him, it was like meeting an elderly Richard Nixon, like an 85-year-old Richard Nixon. It was a surreal experience. But
Jimmy might have given me a reason to go to Seattle.
Sometimes you need one these days, but yeah, really interesting guy. So
okay, very cool.
And speaking of Washington, I'm going to do a throwback to our previous show when Jim mentioned that his favorite burger joint is Carl's Jr., which I believe, Jim, if I'm not mistaken, wouldn't that be close to where Jeremy is in Washington?
The closest one I know is in Arlington, which I think is fairly close.
And they have one a little further up in what's it called? Burlington? Yeah.
Burlington.
Yeah. Or what? I don't know. North of Mount Vernon, whatever city that is.
Bellingham? Mount Vernon?
No, just north of Mount Vernon, over the river.
Well, and Jeremy, just very quickly, go a throwback to our previous show about burgers. What's your take on the Carl's Jr.?
It's okay. I got nothing against Carl's Jr.
Okay. Well, Jim, see, now you have two reasons to go up there. There's one where you thought.
I would regard that as neutral ground if you want to come meet. So
fair enough.
I like it.
That was my number one burger joint. We did a top 3 burger joints in our last episode, and that was my pick for number 1. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm from Linden, where the small chain Bob's Burgers and Brew originated. So represent, but the Carl's Jr. is good too.
All over the place, folks. Where we'll talk about previous shows. You never know what's going to go on here. Keeping it topical within the topic, les upon les. So, Jeremy, and we lost Andy's book there. There we go.
Oh no!
Man overboard. Sorry, much like Landon falling. But aside from the Princess Sparrow book, any other kids' books that are going to be joining the fairy tale?
Yeah, the next one is called the Trouble with Golden Eggs, and I'm having a hard time writing the jacket copy for that because for the first few books, it's a story that with a happy ending, but the goose that laid the golden egg, what happened to her? So I do have kind of a nice ending to it, but I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how to sugarcoat this one or something. as I'm writing the copy. So
I'm digging these re-explorations. I wish I had kids to give them to.
yeah.
Until then, I'll throw my niece and nephews away, and they'll just look at me funny. So. And I want to get back in with the comic books that you were doing. Tell me a little bit about what Adam Smith comics and what entailed that.
Yeah, there's a website called Adam Smith Works. That's Liberty Fund is the vehicle behind that. They're a think tank out of Indiana, I want to say. I think that's right. And I know there's a lady who is the editor there, and I did a book review for him, and she knew I was in the comics, and so she got a hold of me and said, her name is Christy Horpedal, and she got a hold of me and said, hey, we want Adam Smith comics. Would you like to write those? And I said, I'm listening. And so we went back and forth, and we decided these would be one-page comics. And I got Doug Curtis, who's my guy on Movie Man. I got Paula Ritchie, and I got anyways. We put together a team that did 10 of these one-page comics, and we published them over, I think it was about a 2-month period, something like that. And we had a lot of fun. It was what would happen is Christy would queue up a she here's a quote from Adam Smith, and I would create a script, either inspired by that or something that sometimes it would just be that, but here are images to go with it, or something loosely based on it. And I just had to come up with a bunch of different ideas. And Adam Smith, he talked about how science is the great antidote to superstition and whatnot. And so Monty Python, right? She's a witch, burn her, right? So I just reenacted the same thing, except changed it so where the knight is dispelling myths through science, or there was you guys any Hall fans here? I'd rather
it's been a while, but yeah, I did like the movie.
Woody's best movie for sure.
Yeah, there's a moment in that movie where you got Marshall McLuhan, right? There was a professor from Columbia who's holding forth on Marshall McLuhan and his theories of blah blah blah, and Woody Allen is not digging it at all, and he just starts saying can you believe this guy, but within earshot of this guy, right? And the professor says, what happened to what? I can't have an opinion. I teach Marshall McLuhan at Columbia, so I think my theories have lots of validity, right? And he's like, well, I have Marshall McLuhan right here, and he pulls him out behind the actual Marshall McLuhan out from behind a potted plant, and he's like, you know nothing of my work, and starts yelling at the guy, and so we just shifted it a bit. So you have this guy talking about this is what Adam Smith had to say on, what was it, antitrust, because some people make the argument that Adam Smith was the father of antitrust, but if you actually look at what he had to say, no. So you have this guy saying this, and then somebody objecting, and then finally she pulls Adam Smith out, and he starts telling the guy, nothing of my economics. So I just things like that. I just tried to have fun with it, and we'll be doing more. So we'll do more one-pagers, and we're going to do stuff based more based on the life of Smith. We'll do slightly larger comics on he was kidnapped by gypsies when he was 3, so we'll do a comic on that and things like that from his life.
Again, all these reimaginations, I'm a big fan of the What If series way back when with the What If. So it's
oh yeah,
I like the twist things. I dig it.
Indeed. But the one that always sticks in my head is what if Wolverine was an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., because that was one that was actually drawn by Rob Liefeld.
Oh my gosh, it's all coming back to me. Hey, Rick, don't get me started on the X-Men, Jeremy.
Okay, all right.
It's a good and a bad place to go right now. I just start thinking.
Yeah, no. So my Mega Humans Go to War comic is, it's the thing to X-Men where you have mutations and whatnot. But One of the things I always thought was lame about the X-Men is that they're mutants, but like most of them look basically normal, you know. And I'm like, no. I want them to look like freaks, you know. Like there's almost none of them could pass, you know. And
Beast, Nightcrawler, and
yeah, like Jean Grey, you know, Cyclops if he has the right shades on. Wolverine looks like a kind of normal guy, you know. I mean, there are freakish looking X-Men, but I mean, most of them look normal.
Like the Morlocks.
I was gonna say they're all Morlocks.
Yeah. Basically, yes. You know, am I telling if you're gonna have mutations, let's really have mutations, you know?
Yeah, I always felt like scientifically, most of the mutants in the X-Men universe would look more like that than like, you know, Jean Grey or
Wolverine, I have wavy, you know, firecracker hands or whatever, you know. No. Right. No, I have big claws that'll rake you, you know, or I've got, you know, really long legs that can kick doors in and kill people, or, you know, whatever. It should be. Look, I'm not saying you can't do the X-Men the way they've done them. That's fine. It's just in my way of imagining it. It was just these should be freaks, and so that's where I'm going with that.
And when you kick down the door, just kill one character.
Just one. Only one.
Shouldn't have been standing there.
I have a great children's book author.
And the guy shouldn't have been standing there. It's his fault.
That's right. You know.
King of the callback strikes again. Well, Jeremy Lott, definitely love having you on the show. And folks, please be sure to check out Growly Locks and the Three Humans, the Three Feral Pigs, and the Vegan Wolf. You can go to jeremylott.com. That'll take you to all different sites you can go to get these books. Kids books, adult books, comic books. I look forward to reading more of those Adam Smith, those one page. I love the concept on that. So, Jeremy, thanks for joining us here on All Over the Place.
Thanks for having me.
All Over the Place, where the fun sanity never ends.